I used to think that after everything life had thrown at me, the years of solitude, the quiet birthdays, the haunting stillness of a bed too large, I had become immune. That nothing could surprise me anymore, much less awaken the kind of longing I'd buried so deeply, even I forgot where I'd placed it. I was wrong. It happened on a late Sunday morning. The kind of morning where sunlight drips through the kitchen windows in fat, golden streaks, and the smell of cinnamon rolls lingers long after the oven's gone cold. I was sipping my coffee, barefoot on the tiled floor, when I heard the front door open and my daughter's voice echo through the house.
Mom.
I want you to meet someone. I didn't expect it to matter. I didn't expect it to change anything. I had met so many of Rachel's college friends, shy, laughing girls and earnest boys with nervous smiles. I was always kind, always welcoming, always distant. But then he walked in behind her. His name was Julian. And something in me stirred like wind catching flame. Rachel, ever radiant and full of that easy, magnetic confidence that made people want to follow her anywhere, practically skipped into the kitchen. Her chestnut hair was tied up in a loose braid, her face flushed with excitement. She held Julian's hand, as if it were second nature. As if he had already become a part of her life. She didn't want to let go. "This is him," she said, beaming. "Mom, this is Julian." I looked at him then, really looked. There was a sharpness in his features that echoed someone I used to know, a man I had once loved with a recklessness that nearly broke me. The same kind of dark eyes, set beneath brows drawn together in a look of quiet curiosity. His hair curled at the edges, tousled as if the wind had recently run its fingers through it. And when he smiled, the left corner of his mouth pulled up just a fraction more than the right, creating a dimple that felt like déjà vu. "Julian," I repeated, offering my hand. "Nice to meet you." His grip was firm, warm. "Miss Harper, I've heard a lot about you," he said with a calm, assured voice that felt out of place on someone so young. "Rachel talks about you all the time. I'm really glad to finally meet you." "Claire," I said automatically. "Please. Miss Harper makes me feel like I should be wearing shoulder pads and a name tag." He laughed, low and genuine. They sat at the kitchen island while I moved about, pouring more coffee, placing plates on the counter. I listened as Rachel described how they had met, literature and film class, of course, and how Julian had an annoyingly perfect memory for poetry. "He can recite entire sonnets," she said, nudging him with her elbow. Julian rolled his eyes and then turned to me. "She exaggerates." "Do I?" Rachel challenged. "Maybe not." It was all very innocent, very sweet, except for the way he looked at me when she wasn't watching. Just glances, fleeting, but there was something in them. A quiet tension, a curiosity he didn't hide fast enough. And I felt it, God help me, I felt it. I told myself I was imagining it. That this was what happened when you spent too many years alone, when the only hands you felt were your own, folding laundry, scrubbing dishes, rubbing lotion into tired skin at the end of the day. I told myself it was just hormones, loneliness, a heart hungry for attention. But then the visits became more frequent. Julian started coming by even when Rachel wasn't home. He said she'd asked him to pick something up or to wait for her while she finished a study session at the library. Once, he brought a box of croissants from the bakery downtown. "She said you liked almond," he offered with a sheepish grin. I told myself not to read into it, but I began to dread the sound of the doorbell in the same breath I longed for it. And it wasn't just his presence. It was what he brought with him. Energy, brightness. The way he asked questions that made me feel seen, not as Rachel's mother or someone's ex-wife, but as Claire. Just Claire. A woman with thoughts and stories and moments that still mattered. One afternoon, he lingered in the living room after dropping off a set of books Rachel had forgotten. She had texted to say she'd be late. "I can wait," he said, settling onto the couch. I hesitated before joining him, perching on the edge of the armchair across from him, trying to keep the conversation light. "Do you want something to drink?" "Water's fine," he said. When I returned with the glass, he was standing, studying the old framed photo of Rachel and me at the beach, years ago. My hair was windblown, my eyes squinting into the sun. Rachel was clutching a dripping ice cream cone, both of us laughing. She has your smile, he said quietly. I blinked. People say that. They're right. He turned, and his gaze caught mine. But it's different. Hers is sunshine. Yours is weathered. Like it's been earned. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. He placed the glass on the table. Sorry, that sounded strange. No, I said softly. It didn't. And in the silence that followed, something stretched between us. Something fragile. Dangerous. The sound of Rachel's car pulling into the driveway shattered the moment, like glass hitting tile. He stepped back. I stood up. And everything returned to normal. Almost. After that afternoon, I thought perhaps it would all fade. That the strange electricity between us would dissolve in the daylight, under the weight of reason and propriety. I told myself to keep my distance, to remember my place, to protect my daughter from whatever madness had begun to stir in the shadows of my mind. But the world didn't make it easy. Rachel left for a week-long trip to Seattle for a university conference, and the house, once loud with the music of her comings and goings, fell still. I moved through it like a ghost, reacquainting myself with solitude. I hadn't realized how used I'd become to her laughter filling the rooms, to her boots by the door, to the hum of her voice behind her bedroom wall. Then one evening Julian called. Not texted. Called. The sound of his voice through the phone felt more intimate than it should have. Claire? I hope it's okay. I just wanted to see if you needed anything while Rachel's away. I'm fine, I said, trying to sound breezy. But thank you. There was a pause, the kind thick with all the things not being said. I made too much pasta, he said finally. And I remembered you like arrabbiata. The next thing I knew, we were sitting across from each other at my kitchen table again, plates of steaming pasta between us, a bottle of wine breathing near the sink. He had brought garlic bread too, still warm, wrapped in a towel, and a small Tupperware container of roasted vegetables. It's not a bribe, he said, grinning. Just dinner. It was, quite possibly, the best meal I'd had in years. We talked easily like we always did. About nothing, about everything. He told me about the book he was reading, a collection of essays on memory and nostalgia. I told him about the gallery I used to work at before Rachel was born, how I once thought I'd spend my life surrounded by art and quiet, intelligent conversation. He leaned back, sipping his wine. Why'd you stop? I smiled, bittersweet. Rachel came along, and suddenly it felt selfish to want both. You gave it up for her? I gave it up because I wanted to be present, because I thought that's what love was, sacrifice. Maybe it is. He was quiet for a moment. Watching me with that expression, I was beginning to dread and crave in equal measure. You don't talk like anyone I know, he said. That's because I'm old, I replied with a dry laugh. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. You're not old, Claire. You're awake. Most people are just walking through their lives half asleep. I didn't know what to say to that. He helped me clean up afterward, his hands brushing against mine as we reached for the same plate. I pulled away quickly, my heart hammering in my chest. When he turned to thank me and say goodnight, his voice caught slightly. I shouldn't have come. I looked up, startled. Why? Because I knew I wanted to. His eyes were steady, vulnerable. And that's the problem, isn't it? I stood in the silence, barely able to breathe. Every cell in my body screamed to say something, to stop him, to tell him I felt it too. But I couldn't. Not when it was my daughter, he had once kissed. Not when it was her, he was supposed to love. So I nodded. Yes. That's the problem. And he left. The following days passed like a dream half remembered. I replayed our conversation on loop, trying to scrub the truth from it. I busied myself with chores I'd already done, cleaned windows that didn't need cleaning. But his absence echoed through the house like the soft ticking of a clock left behind. Rachel returned home full of stories and photos, her arms wrapping around me with a warmth that made me feel both comforted and crushed. She never asked if I'd seen Julian while she was gone. And I didn't offer it. But I saw the shift. The slow unraveling of something between them. She laughed less when she spoke of him, shrugged off texts instead of smiling at her phone. I knew it was happening, and still I couldn't let myself feel relief. It was too soon. Too cruel. A few days later, Julian came by to drop off a book Rachel had loaned him. I kept my distance, stayed upstairs, but I heard them talking in the entryway. She was cool, polite, detached. He asked if she was okay. "I'm just tired," she said. "There's a lot going on." A pause. "I'll see you around," she added. And then the door closed. That night, long after Rachel had gone to bed, there was a knock at the back door. Soft. Hesitant. I opened it before my brain could remind me how dangerous this was. Julian stood there, rain misting his hair, his hands in his pockets. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I let him in. He didn't kiss me. He didn't touch me. He just sat with me on the couch, both of us facing the empty fireplace, our shoulders almost but not quite touching. "I'm not with her anymore," he said after a while. I nodded, silent. "I don't think I ever really was," he added. "I was trying to get close to something, but it wasn't her." My breath caught. "Julian," I whispered. "I know," he said. "I know it's not right, but I'm not sorry." And neither was I. After that night, Julian and I became two halves of a broken compass, drawn to each other despite knowing we could never point in the same direction without leading someone astray. We didn't speak about it, not in words, not directly. But something shifted. A veil lifted. And in its place, the bare, vulnerable truth remained between us like the air we breathed, unspoken, undeniable, dangerous. He didn't come by often. When he did, it was never planned. A walk past the house that turned into a knock on the back door. A book he forgot to return. A question about a recipe I'd once mentioned in passing. Excuses, all of them. But I accepted them without protest. I told myself it was nothing. A few quiet conversations. A shared coffee at the edge of a too-late hour. A joke that lingered too long in the air. But it was never nothing. Not when his gaze found mine across the kitchen table, searching for permission. Not when he reached out without thinking and brushed my hand lightly, like a promise unfulfilled. Not when he stood too close, too long, and the silence crackled between us like a live wire. I was unraveling, and I knew it, but I didn't stop. One evening, Rachel burst into the living room with flushed cheeks and an open laptop in her hands. "Mom, guess what? I got the internship in DC." I blinked, startled out of my reverie. "You what?" She practically danced in place. "The law firm I told you about, they picked me. It's a full summer program. Housing, stipend, everything." The joy in her voice was electric. I stood and wrapped my arms around her, letting her excitement fill the empty corners of my chest. "That's incredible," I said and meant it. "I'm so proud of you." She grinned, bouncing on her toes. "I leave in 2 weeks." And just like that, the clock started ticking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, counting shadows. The thought of having the house to myself again should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like a test I wasn't sure I would pass. A week later, Julian texted. "Julian, Rachel told me she's leaving soon. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "Me? I don't know." He responded almost instantly. "Julian, can I come by? Just to talk." We sat in the den, a soft storm whispering outside the windows, the lights dimmed to something nearly intimate. I had made tea to keep things neutral, but neither of us touched our mugs. "She's not angry," he said finally, after a long pause. "She just knew it wasn't going to last. I think she's relieved." I said nothing. "She's amazing," he continued. "Smart kind. But she's still figuring out who she is." "And you?" I asked. "Do you know?" His gaze lifted to mine. "I do when I'm with you." The words sat between us, daring me to breathe. "I shouldn't want this," I whispered. "But you do." The fire flickered low in the hearth. The clock on the wall ticked once, and then again. I didn't answer. Instead, I closed my eyes. And when I opened them, his hand was resting gently over mine. "Just stay. I said, not sure if I was asking or confessing. He didn't move closer. He didn't kiss me. He just sat with me, our hands tangled like the roots of a tree grown in secret. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I stood by the kitchen window, coffee warm in my hands, watching the pale light stretch over the lawn. Julian had gone before dawn, as quietly as he had come. Rachel appeared in the doorway, bleary-eyed but smiling. "You're up early." "Just couldn't sleep." She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. "You'll miss me when I'm gone," she teased. I smiled gently. "I'll miss you every day." The day she left, I helped her load her suitcase into the back of the Uber. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "I'll call every night, okay?" And then she was gone. The silence in the house afterward wasn't peaceful, it was enormous. The first evening without her, I found myself moving aimlessly from room to room, folding towels that didn't need folding, rearranging spices. I turned on the television just to hear another voice. But nothing filled the space she had left behind. Then, at precisely 9:06 p.m., the doorbell rang. Julian stood on the porch, his hair damp from the summer rain, a book clutched in his hand. "I brought you something," he said. I stepped aside. And just like that, he was inside again. We didn't talk much that night. We didn't need to. He sat beside me on the sofa, the book forgotten on the coffee table, and slowly, quietly, he reached for my hand. No promises. No declarations. Just the simple, impossible truth of two people caught in something they couldn't name out loud. When he finally leaned in, his lips brushed my cheek first, hesitant, asking. I turned, and our mouths met in a kiss so slow, so careful, it felt like a secret blooming in the dark. My hands cupped his face. His arms circled my waist. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't recklessness. It was longing finally allowed to speak. And in that moment, the world outside disappeared. The days that followed were quiet, but nothing about them felt calm. Each hour throbbed with memory. Not regret, never regret, but the weight of a truth too sharp to hold barehanded. Julian didn't come every night. That would have been too obvious. Too dangerous. Instead, he arrived like a tide, predictable only to those who studied its rhythm. He would knock gently, wait with that breathless stillness I came to recognize, and when I opened the door, there was never hesitation. We lived in fragments. Coffee in the morning, his hand brushing mine as he reached for the sugar. A silent dinner in the garden, where the candlelight made the air shimmer. A glance across the living room when I passed him a glass of wine. Brief, burning. We spoke very little about Rachel. Not out of guilt, exactly, but reverence. Love, when twisted into something it shouldn't be, becomes something brittle and holy all at once. We didn't speak her name when our hands were tangled in the hush of night. We didn't speak her name when I traced the line of Julian's collarbone and felt his breath stutter beneath my fingers. He was so young. That was the phrase that haunted me most. Not wrong, not forbidden, but young. I had lived a life. I had held a child against my chest, cried in bathrooms with the faucet running, scrubbed years off my bones with hard work and sacrifice. I had given and folded and stretched myself thin enough to vanish. Julian had not. But with him, I remembered who I was before I disappeared. He didn't see me as Rachel's mother, or someone to be pitied for her loneliness. He saw me, Claire. A woman with trembling hands and a body that remembered desire even after decades of forgetting. A woman who once dreamed of art and oceans and love that could shake the sky. It was dangerous, this clarity. One afternoon, I sat on the porch steps, watching the wind toy with the edge of the garden. Julian came up behind me, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. We hadn't spoken much that day, both of us weighted by some unspoken knowing. "She'll come back soon," he said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. "What happens when she does?" I looked up at him, into the face I had memorized far too well. His eyes weren't pleading, just honest. "I don't know," I whispered. Julian crouched beside me, his fingers weaving gently through mine. "I'd go," he said. "If you asked me to." If that's what you needed. Tears threatened at the corners of my eyes. That's not what I need. His brow furrowed slightly. Then what do you need? I need time. I need the ache to stop feeling like a betrayal. Julian kissed the back of my hand. I don't think it ever will. I swallowed hard. That's what scares me. That night, he didn't stay. He kissed me at the door. Long, slow, final. He whispered, I love you. And I didn't say it back, not because it wasn't true, but because truth had become a blade between us. And I couldn't bear to wound him with it. Rachel returned 3 days later, full of stories and energy, and the glow of new experience. She hugged me tight and buried her face in my neck. I missed you, Mom, she murmured. You look lighter. I smiled. Maybe I needed the quiet. She didn't mention Julian. Not that day. Not the next. But one evening, as we were folding laundry side by side, she said it quietly, without accusation. You saw him while I was gone. I folded a towel with mechanical precision. I did. She nodded, looking down at the sheet in her hands. I figured. A long pause. Then she asked, Do you love him? My breath caught. I looked at her, the girl I had raised, the girl I had given my whole life to. And in her eyes, I saw not anger, but something softer, sadder. I don't know what to call it, I said truthfully. But it wasn't something I planned. And it wasn't about you. She swallowed, blinking fast. I didn't expect you to fall for someone, especially not him. Neither did I. Silence again. Then she whispered, He looked at you differently. I saw it. I just didn't want to believe it. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it away, not cruelly, but with the quiet withdrawal of someone still wounded. I'm not angry, she said, but I don't know how to feel about it yet. I nodded. That's fair. She stood then, gathering the rest of the folded sheets. I think I just need some space. Not forever. Just a while. When she left the room, I sat there alone, surrounded by the neatly folded remnants of our shared life. And for the first time, I didn't cry. Because love, real love, isn't always soft. Sometimes it's jagged. Sometimes it asks you to carry weight that doesn't belong to you. Sometimes it leaves you sitting in a quiet room, wondering if what you had was worth the cost. Julian texted a few days later. Julian, are you okay? I stared at the screen. Then slowly I typed. Me. I don't know, but I will be. Julian, I miss you. Me. I miss you too. There was no plan to meet. No promise to wait. Just a shared understanding that what we had mattered. That it had changed us both. That it might always live just under the skin, like a healed wound that still aches in the rain. And that would have to be enough. Some love stories don't end with forever. Some end with a whisper, with a lesson, with a single, impossible truth. We were never meant to last. But, oh, how we lived in the space between should and want. And sometimes, that's where the most dangerous, beautiful kind of love begins.